As vaccines receive approval and become available to the world, the next questions are ethical, such as who gets the vaccine first. Not only do we have to take into account which age groups to prioritise, but also which jobs. Frontline health workers around the world are already demanding better protection. And how should distribution work around the world? As it stands, rich countries are already preparing infrastructure and buying up future doses by the billions. But won't that leave poorer countries already grappling with inadequate healthcare systems, struggling to secure their own? The fair distribution of a coronavirus vaccine looks set to be one of the major challenges of the coming months, if not years. The World Health Organization, who we'll hear from later, says the world cannot afford to get it wrong. But time is running out to prepare a framework for getting any vaccine to everyone who needs it.
It's a huge achievement for the scientists at the University of Oxford. Together with drug maker AstraZeneca, they've developed their own coronavirus vaccine. Researchers say it's most effective when patients receive a half dose, followed by a second full dose a month later. The developers say it offers several advantages over competing vaccines. It can be stored at refrigerator temperatures for more than 6 months, making it easy to distribute. And AstraZeneca claims it can be produced more cheaply than other vaccines. The company is now seeking emergency use listing from the World Health Organization.
It's really excellent to see that the high efficacy that we're now getting out of these trials, coupled with the safety, the ability to manufacture in large doses, the ability to feed into existing distribution networks for vaccines that already are in place around the world. Because all of that together, this vaccine and other vaccines as well, is what's going to really make a difference. We have to get a lot of people vaccinated.
AstraZeneca is the third Western drug company to report success with their coronavirus vaccine candidates. Recently, German company BioNTech, in partnership with Pfizer and US-based company Moderna, presented mRNA-based COVID-19 vaccines, which the companies claim are almost 95% effective. Vaccines developed by Chinese and Russian researchers also show high reported efficacy. Some have already been approved for emergency use.
The next challenge is going to be to get enough people immunized fast enough to have an impact on the virus. And that does take time. I mean, it simply takes time to manufacture, to get the vaccines distributed, and then to get them into people's arms. It can't just be done overnight. So the more vaccines we've got, the more doses of each of the vaccines we've got, the easier that's going to be.
The question remains, how can the vaccines be distributed in a fair way without discriminating against poorer nations? That's the challenge facing the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access Initiative, or COVAX. But with industrialized nations having already secured around 1.2 billion doses for themselves, the task is daunting.
Well, we can now speak to Richard Mihigo from the World Health Organization's Immunization and Vaccine Development Programme. He joins us from Brazzaville in Republic of Congo. Thanks a lot for being with us. So let's just talk about this COVAX coalition for getting a vaccine to the poorer countries. A vaccine's getting close, but the WHO says COVAX is still something like 4 billion underfunded. Is COVAX going to be ready for this vaccine?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to clarify that the COVAX was set up to make sure that the developing countries, and including the majority of African countries, can get access to vaccine at the same time than the developed world. And it sets quite some ambitious goals of at least providing millions of vaccine doses to African developed countries by the end of 2021. So with the target of fundraising that the COVAX has set for itself to raise up to $2 billion by the end of December 2020 as a first step. I think we can say that at least the preliminary data that we have show that target of 2 billion have been reached, which is by itself, it's quite something very positive in terms of resource mobilization. But
yeah, and you've got 187 countries involved in COVAX already, which is, you know, a lot of countries. But there's one notable country that is not involved, and that's the US. I mean, can this program succeed without the world's biggest economy?
Well, I think that has been a constant debate around that. I think it has been shown that clearly the objective of at least supplying vaccines to less developed countries through that mechanism can be achieved. Because if we looked at the number of countries that have adhered to the COVAX, today we have 189 countries representing close to 90% of the global population has supported the initiative. So as much as we would have loved the US, the United States of America, to join that initiative, I think that with what has been done so far, it's really a good sign of solidarity globally in supporting countries that are less developed, introducing these vaccine at the same time that the rich one.
Yeah, is there any hope that under a Biden presidency that the US might get involved?
Well, I think it might be a bit earlier to predict in which direction that will go. But we do hope that the change in administration in the United States might, of course, send a different signal. And hopefully the United States can do this initiative.
So how confident is the WHO that poor nations are going to be able to get access to the vaccines they need?
Well, I think nobody can be 100% sure. And this has been even raised, as you know, last week during the G20 summit, that there is a real risk that some of the countries, particularly in Africa, may not get the vaccine at the same time that other countries. So I think we are continuing to push for that advocacy and to make sure that many countries in the region will access the vaccine at the same time. But there is very little guarantee at the moment that will happen. And I think this is why we need to continue to do that type of advocacy.
Richard Mihigo from the World Health Organization, thanks for joining us on the COVID-19 special.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
And now's the part of the programme where you get to ask the questions. You've been submitting them through our YouTube channel. So now let's put one of them to our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
Is COVID-19 now endemic?
When I read this question, I thought, okay, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. The fact that despite all of our fondest hopes, this virus is not going to fizzle out and go away. First, let's define endemic. The way we're using the word here is in its epidemiological sense, which describes when an infection is more or less constantly present in the background within a specific population and geographic region. But it also implies that it's in a kind of steady state, which COVID-19 is not at the moment. It's still spreading fast and furiously in many places all over the planet. One of two things could happen next. When enough people build up immunity to it through infection or vaccination, COVID-19 could become an endemic disease, or it could just apparently burn itself out and disappear like SARS did. But nah, that's not going to happen. In other words, at this point, if we could say that the disease was endemic, we'd actually be farther along the road towards returning to life as usual than we are. It would mean COVID-19 was no longer out of control, but was a disease we had tools to cope with. We'll develop those tools eventually, just like we did with AIDS and influenza. In fact, probably a lot faster. But But wiping the virus out entirely at this point would take a massive planet-wide strategy, like the one that wiped out smallpox and has nearly banished polio. But projects like that take high levels of cooperation between nations, and they take time. So COVID-19 is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, but to some extent at least, for how long will depend on us.
Our science correspondent Derek Williams there. A vaccine for COVID-19 could be just around the corner, but how willing are people around the world to actually take it? A recent survey published in the journal Nature showed that around 70% of respondents would take a vaccine when it became available. People in Asian countries like China, South Korea and Japan lead the way in terms of their readiness to get vaccinated, while large proportions of some Eastern European countries, for example, like Poland and Hungary, say they don't want it. But what about you? Would you get vaccinated against COVID-19? We're taking a survey on both our Twitter account and our YouTube channel. That's at DW_SciTech or DW News on YouTube. Log in and let us know if you'd be willing to take a vaccine when one becomes widely available. And if not, why not? We'll bring you the results of the survey very soon.